Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. All right, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is an authentic display of people's courage and trials and tribulation through hellish environments, people who have survived things that a lot of people don't survive. I have a lot of interesting different types of speakers on here. We've had Holocaust speakers, people who have been wrongfully convicted of crimes and did 15 years in prison that were innocent. We do a lot of recovering addicts. And tonight I have Rachel on the show, Rachel B. And I don't think I've ever heard your story. I think I've only heard people look at me and be like, oh, Rachel's got a crazy story. And you are actually the wife to Patrick B., who was on the show earlier. He had the show about shooting heroin in Tijuana and stuff like that. So you guys are a match made in heaven. You know, I was best man at your guys' wedding for Patrick. So, yeah, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It's definitely an honor to be here. So, yeah, my name is Rachel. And, addiction for me, for sure. I am one of those people where addiction ran like really deep in my family. I am one of 3 kids. So it starts off super interesting and crazy. I was born in Broward County jail. My mom was incarcerated when she gave birth to me. My mom had me, I'm the youngest of 3. She had me 15 years after her last child, which was my half brother. Then I have an oldest sister. She would probably be in her 50s now. She died from all the complications of all of my mother's drug use when she was pregnant with her. She lived to be about 32 or 33 years old. She never left an institution. She was born with what they call alligator syndrome or something like that. Her skin was like inside out and she could only see like peripheral vision.
Holy shit.
She had all kinds of different issues. My stepmother told me about her by accident probably about 15 years ago. I had never even knew that she had existed. Yeah. My mom we never discussed those things. Then I have a brother who he's 48 years old now. He's an addict for sure. He's in total denial, but he was born with a lot of mental and physical deformities also. He's 6'7" and has a 37-degree bend in his spine. Wow. And he can't walk straight. He's got OCD really bad. He has to turn like a doorknob like 5 or 6 times to leave. He's got all kinds of issues going on.
From your mother using during pregnancy.
So I always think of it as such a gift, from the universe that I was born in Broward County Jail. I mean, it's funny. I always say the system's been saving my life since the beginning, because...
So you were born in the jail?
Yeah.
There's like a hospital there?
Well, they take you to Broward County, Broward General.
Broward General, but it was under supervision.
Yeah, she was handcuffed to the bed.
Wow.
She gave birth to me and then went and had to do about 18 months. So I went to go live with my dad's parents. My dad was still using at the time. My dad and my mom, all they did was use together. There really wasn't more of a relationship there with them.
Heroin and crack.
Yeah, anything. My dad was on the methadone clinic. I think my mom was too for a lot of years at that time. After that, I lived there for like 18 months. And then my mom got out of prison and came to get me. And where it started for my brother was, he was like, I guess 14 or something at the time. And she packed up all my stuff. We went to go live with my grandma where my brother was. We packed up all my stuff. My mom packed up our stuff. And then we left. And my brother just watched us leave. And she never came back for him. So their relationship was always really terrible. Yeah, and I mean, it was just like the normal living with an addict. I mean, my mom prostituted by day. She was a dancer at night. She would leave me home alone. And it's funny, I can have memories when I was like 5 and 6 years old the neighbor would call the cops all the time because my mom would leave me by myself for so long. She'd call the cops would come. My mom would be down the street prostituting, so she'd see the cops. She'd come up to the door and be like, oh, I was just at the grocery store. And I guess back then DCF wasn't as
strict.
Yeah, as diligent as they are now.
Is this Hollywood?
Yeah, in Hollywood. We lived off a street called Elm Street. Oh, man.
Yeah, Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, my nightmare.
Yeah.
You know, I can remember all kinds of weird people always coming in and out of the house. And, you know, one time I was trying to clean the shower for my mom and I just wanted her attention, you know, and she just was incapable of giving me attention. You know, the drugs unfortunately just had taken over her. And I was cleaning the shower and I picked up this glass vase and I put shampoo on my hands. I grabbed the vase, I threw water on it, and the vase slipped out of my hands and it came up and it basically cut my entire thumb off. It was like hanging. And I remember going out there and she was completely knotted out, like on the couch with like a couple guys in the living room. So I went to the neighbor and I knocked on her door and they took me to the hospital and I was gone for almost 24 hours and she didn't even know when I got home. And it was just a lot of stuff like that. My life changed a little bit when I was about 7. My mom was prostituting right by the John E. McKinney Tunnel.
As a kid, did you know what it was?
So I think for me, what messed me up the most is also as an only child, and I didn't have anybody to like talk to or like bounce stuff off of, is all the way up until I was 15. My mom went back to prison when I was 15. All those years in between and of my mom just disappearing and all of these things, I had no idea anything about drugs. So I just started to like incorporate these beliefs that I just wasn't good enough. I wasn't lovable. I wasn't worth my mom spending time with, that I didn't matter. Like these moms out there playing with their kids out in the street, like 5 and 6 years old, and I'm in our apartment and my mom is gone and I'm outside and I'm trying to play and I'm climbing the trees and I'm all by myself and I probably was dirty and I mean, whatever it was, like all the other kids wouldn't play with me. So it was just like, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I thought that it was.
And when you would see your mom all fucked up, would you think that like she was on any type of substances or you just thought?
I didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, and when we moved when my mom was prostituting in Fort Lauderdale, I guess something had happened and she was crying on, I don't know if you remember on Johnny McKinney, right before that tunnel, there used to be a 7-Eleven there by Rio Vista. Mm-hmm. Well, she was sitting right there on the curb, I guess, crying, and the man that became my stepdad pulled up and asked her if she was okay. And the next thing I knew, we moved into his house the next day. And he had $1 million home in Rio Vista on the Intercoastal.
Wow.
He owns a huge marina in Fort Lauderdale off of State Road 84. And he was definitely a godsend. You know, as I look back into my life, in all these moments, like in the 12-step program that I work, you know, we have a program that we go back and we dig into like our past and stuff. And one of the most important things is to find the spiritual connection in each thing that has brought me to where I am, where God has looked out for me, you know, and I definitely believe that that was one of those moments because I probably would have died living there. So this
random millionaire just moved you guys in?
Moved us into his huge
Was he in a relationship with your mom or he was just helping your mom out?
No, they stayed together for 10 years. For 10 years, we lived there. And my mom got normal. She got on the methadone clinic and became functioning. And like any good addict I know, you know, she went all in 100% and was, she became volunteer of the year for my school. I went to Harbordale Elementary School right over there. And she did this huge organic garden in the school. And she would like get all the kids to come and do the gardening. And like she was super involved. Everybody knew my mom. And you know, so like life got good. And, you know, my stepdad was a provider. He didn't really show me love, but he provided for us and it gave my mom the ability to like parent me. And she was a great mom. And that went on for about 10 years. And when I turned about 14, all of a sudden my mom picked up crack cocaine again, just it was out of nowhere to me. Mm-hmm. And it was just like the rug got ripped from under my feet. You know, the only stability that I had ever known. And next thing, my stepdad left and my mom was just completely out of control, you know, and things got really embarrassing in school. I was really popular in school. I played a lot of sports. I was in cheerleading and I remember I used to have all these parties.
What school?
I went to Sunrise Middle, and then I ended up moving out to Plantation.
Okay.
And I went to Seminole Middle School.
Wow.
And then I went to South Plantation High.
Mm-hmm.
All the kids would come over to my house because my mom was getting messed up, and so she didn't care what we were doing. I remember once she came out, and I had all my friends in the living room, and she like knocked an empty pill bottle off the counter and got on her hands and knees and started picking up like pills that weren't even there.
Yeah.
And it was like the first time people really started to know that there was some things going on in my life. And it just kind of like reiterated for me, never feeling good enough. You know, I always had a lot of friends to try to overcompensate for how I felt about myself. Like I felt like if I had a bunch of friends, like I would feel I'd be, you know, validated by some means. I used other people's houses with my friends to try to get away from what was going on in my house. I had one best friend, and I used to go to her house all the time, and her parents knew. As I got older, actually, these people were in the program that knew my mom, and when my mom would get Baker acted, they said that I used to go over there. I don't remember any of that. Mm-hmm. Said I would go spend I would just be like a sleepover. So I guess what was happening was my mom was being Baker acted, and I was being put over there, and I had a really hard time in school. I didn't ever feel a part of. I felt like I had to live two lives. You know, like in school, I had to portray that everything was good in my house. On the outside, everything looked really good. We had a lot of money. I had everything that I wanted materialistic wise, but inside, like I had just always felt like I was, like my skin would crawl, the anxiety that if somebody found out what was really going on inside of my house, you know, my mom would have abscesses on her arms. She got into this GHB stuff with this lady, and I remember she was driving me to school, and she nodded out while driving and almost hit a bunch of the kids at my school. And when I was in middle school, I stopped wanting to go to school because people would talk about it, you know. And we just towards the end, we ended up, my stepdad left us, we moved out to Davie. And all I wanted to do was finish school. Like I wanted an education. The rest of my family's pretty educated. I have an uncle who's an attorney. I have two other people that are doctors in my family. I have a cousin that runs a huge business in Atlanta. You know, they all do really well, but they're all functioning alcoholics. I really wanted like an education, you know, and I didn't want to be like my mom and end up depending on somebody. So when my mom would get all messed up, I would just go take her car and drive to school when I was like 13. And I would park about a mile away from the school, and I'd walk. And I would go to school, and then I would walk, and I would drive home. And most of the time, she never even knew I was gone. And then it's crazy to talk about this, to go back, you know, because where I am in my life now, like it's amazing what happens when you go back and you do a lot of internal work and you stop questioning why these things happened and why me. And, you know, I wish my mom could have been better. And I stopped hating her so much. Like I just start to look back and look at the little girl that I was and have empathy and have sympathy, but I get to love her now where she was. Like I could see myself as that child now and know that like that child was loved the best way that she was able to be loved, like no matter what. You know, and like I can feel super connected to her now, where I used to hate who that was because of how that child felt. And that child was me. But, you know, I started driving myself to school. And then after that, like my mom just got super bad. And my dad was kind of like in and out at the time. And
Your real dad?
My real dad, yeah. My stepdad was long gone. Like he just totally was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Disappeared.
Yeah, he tried to put my mom in rehab so many times. And it just didn't work. She would go, she would get clean for a little bit, and she'd come out and the whole thing would start all over again. But her and my stepmom decided they were going to get really close and be really good friends. And they would come over on the weekends to my stepdad's house, and we would have dinner. And then all of a sudden, when my mom relapsed, she like disappeared for a couple of days. So my stepmom went over the house to see if she was okay. She went into the bedroom and my mom was passed out. My stepmom said she opened the drawer and it was full of drugs. It had needles and it had heroin and it had all this stuff in it. And she just said, screw it, and picked up and started using with my mom. So her and my mom like went on this crazy like drug run together. So when we were living in the place in Davie, Mary Beth would come over, my stepmom, and her and my mom would just disappear for like 3 or 4 days and come back and then sleep for 3 or 4 days. And I could remember just being hungry And I was like a teenager at this time. And I don't know if I was in denial that my mom was on drugs. I still don't remember saying, like, my mom's on drugs.
Yeah.
Like, something's, like, wrong.
It was like a denial, naive thing.
Yeah, or like, and I don't know if it had to do with like growing up in getting the opportunity to go to a really good school, live in a really like nice neighborhood. Like I wasn't around that kind of stuff. And if I was, they were like me and really good at hiding it. Like nobody talked about it. So there was like, we had the DARE program, but they weren't like, this is what somebody looks like on drugs.
Yeah.
You know, like I just didn't have like that connection. I don't know if that was like God's way of protecting me from it or some way, but I didn't find out that my mom was on drugs until I was about 15 years old, and the cops raided our house and took my mom to prison. She had like an old warrant, and somebody had called the cops on her, and this whole like I don't remember exactly what the whole thing was. I never really asked her too much about it. My mom and I had never really had much of a relationship. She never got clean. She went to prison, and my best friend at the time's family allowed me to come in and move in with them. It was just, again, like I felt displaced. You know, I moved in with there. I started using drugs for the first time. And I wasn't that addict that like used and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm partying. I'm having fun. Like I used and I was like, I'm checked out. This is great. Like I don't think about anything that's going on in my past. Like I immediately.
Yeah, it was instantly an escape.
Exactly. It was instantly like I took it and I was like, okay, I can do this. Like
What was the first thing you were taking?
Well, I smoked pot for the first time, which I didn't like. And I got pills. They like just made me numb, the opiates. And how I started getting them was when I moved in with my best friend. It was her mom and her stepdad. And her stepdad started making like sexual passes at me. And I've learned now it's called grooming. And what they do is I was extremely vulnerable. I was looking for love. I had never been encouraged or loved or in the right ways, you know, like I had never been parented, you know, and whatever parenting means, but I had never been given like that love that a child needs to feel safe. And he started doing that to me, but in a extremely inappropriate way. But it felt good. Like I liked it. I liked being told that I was beautiful. I liked being told that I was sexy. I liked being told like these things. And he started giving me drugs like on the side. He would give me a few pills. Wow. And then the girl and her mom, they were all partying and eating acid and taking ecstasy. So we started doing that.
With the mom?
Yeah, we were all we would go down to downtown Fort Lauderdale and it would be nothing to see their parents in the club. Like up in the VIP, just partying.
Crazy.
The uncle sold like massive amounts of pot and they had like all these friends that were like selling all these drugs. And like every weekend we would go to like our typical high school keg parties and then we would come home and there would be like 30 adults like rolling and tripping on acid in the house. And they would come to the door and they'd be like, here's a couple rolls, just take you and your friends out in the backyard and don't bother us. But they'd have a DJ in the house.
Wow.
It was just like crazy. And like I was having a blast, you know, and I was told that my mom got out of prison and found out that I was living there and that she had called and the stepdad had answered the phone and said, if you come on this property, I'll kill you. And I didn't see my mom for 10 years when I didn't see her.
Did you know that?
No, not until way later.
How did you feel? Like, were you, like you wanted to see your mom at that point, right?
It would have been nice to have had the option.
Yeah.
You know, because what was happening in that house was I was being treated really poorly by my best friend and her mom because there was a lot of jealousy that was happening because you couldn't deny what was probably the energy that a wife would feel when her husband is being inappropriate to another woman. I mean, it was in the house. And, you know, then he started sneaking in my room in the middle of the night and would put a pillow over my face and have sex with me.
Wow.
And he took my virginity.
That's
and
insane.
I remember how painful that it was. And he wouldn't even turn on the lights. He would come in, he'd put the pillow over my face, he would get on top of me, and then he would leave.
Jesus.
And this happened every night for probably 8 months until my dad was using, my real dad at the time. I just didn't have anybody. I didn't have my mom wasn't there. My family wanted nothing to do with me. Because, see, my family...
And you're probably still underage at this time, for
yeah,
sure.
I was in high school.
Jesus.
I was 17, 16.
Crazy.
I dropped out of high school when I was in the 11th grade because I started dating this guy who was an older guy who gave me a chance to come in and live with him and his mom. And I took the first chance I could get to get out of that house. What I realized when I was living there is I started to develop the manipulation behaviors. I started to learn that I could use my body to get things that I wanted. Because look, the thing is that even though that was happening and I look back and like how wrong that was, like I saw how that groomed me to become better at knowing that I could use my body to get what I needed. Because I didn't believe in who I was. I didn't know who I was. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. So I used my body to communicate.
Yeah, the first time someone takes advantage of you, you start to turn around and be like, all right, well, next time I'm going to be the one taking advantage of the person.
Oh, yeah. And that's a huge part of, it's like the abused become the abuser. And that definitely has happened for me and throughout my using, But I moved in with this guy and my using really took off. I started snorting coke for the first time, and I was that person that just couldn't get enough. I just wanted to do line after line. I wanted more. I didn't want to go to sleep. I didn't care. I didn't want to eat that. I didn't want to drink the water. I didn't want to try to calm down. Like I just wanted to keep using, and I would lie, and I would try to scheme and do all these things. And the guy that I was dating at that time ended up going to prison for fighting. My dad actually, I don't think he was clean, but he let me move in with him for the first time in my whole life when my ex went to prison. And I moved in with him and I was there for about 3 weeks. I started doing pretty good. I got a job at a gym. I wasn't using. I think I was around 18 years old. I just stopped. I got a job at the gym. I was like doing really well. I met this guy and I fell in love for the first time. Like really fell in love with someone. And I stayed with this guy for 2 years. I went and I got my mortgage license. I bought, a $250,000 condo on the ocean by the time I was 19. Wow. I had a brand new BMW. I was making like $40,000 a month. Like I was working at Countrywide Home Loans. I was doing amazing there. And then all of a sudden my mom got out of prison. I get this phone call. My mom calls me and she's like, I want to see you. And I was like, okay. So I see her and we start talking and I meet a friend of hers and this friend has pills and now all of a sudden I'm buying pills from this friend. And then my mom disappears again for a little while. But now my addiction starts up again.
All over again.
And now the hatred for my mom really starts to stew at this time. And I used blaming what my mom did to me and my whole life on why I had to start taking pills again. And I started taking pills again. I would show up to work so messed up. And then the pills, I started doing coke again. I would take money every morning I would take money out of the ATM. I'd go get 2 grams of coke and I would go to my job at Countrywide and so what I was doing there is I would go out and solicit real estate developers that owned rental properties that were converting them into condos. And I would get the contracts to be able to sit in on these condo conversions. So I was doing like 80 to 90 loans a month. And I would sit in these leasing offices all day taking mortgage contracts. And as I'm sitting there, I'm going to the bathroom and I keep snorting coke. And I can remember one time I was sitting there and I'm taking the application and there's a father and his son and my nose just starts pouring blood all over the paperwork. And the guys are like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, just give me a second. I went to the bathroom. I cleaned up, snorted some more coke, came back out, and I was come home and I was lying to my boyfriend and he's like, I know you're high. And I'm like, I'm not high. And I was so crazy. I tried to go to the gym and get in the sauna and sweat it out real quick. I don't ever recommend doing that. Thank God I was young, that I didn't have a heart attack, in there. And, but he eventually left me. I went into treatment and,
were you heavily doing pills at that point?
No, I had stopped doing pills. I was just strictly doing coke. Yeah. I just couldn't get onto anything else. That's where I just wanted to keep going, and it made me, I thought good at my job. And I did do really well at my job until I didn't.
Yeah.
And so I bought a condo in the same building that my dad was in. My dad's lived in the same condo for 35 years. And I bought a condo in that same building. So remember, I had been sleeping for like 3 days. I had been up and my boyfriend at the time and my dad come into the condo and they threw a bag on the floor and they're like, Rachel, if you don't get help, like I'm leaving you. And my dad was like, I can't do this with you anymore. My dad would come up to my apartment and he would leave food on my floor and he would go back downstairs because he knew I'd be up using. I could remember coming home in my car and he'd be sitting on my parking spot at like 5 a.m. Like my old father sitting out there just waiting for me. And then he would see me and he wouldn't say anything to me. He'd just get up and walk inside. And I just didn't care, And so I ended up going to treatment. And I am that statistic that meets a guy in treatment, takes them home with me, has kids with him, and thinks that that's going to make everything better.
Wow.
And I met this guy in transitions I was at in Miami. Yeah, that was my first taste of treatment. And I took him and I was like, I've never had a one night stand. I'm going to do this, and I take him home, we have sex, and then I'm pregnant. I didn't want her. I didn't want the baby. The guy was just like, no, please, let's keep her, all this. And so I decided to keep her. But even though I wanted to keep her, I knew that I couldn't stop using. I ended up selling my condo in Miami and moving to Orlando while I was pregnant. I kept using. And I remember being pregnant and Googling, like I would eat a bunch of pills. Like now it was pills and Coke, and I would eat a bunch of pills and I would Google, what vitamins does Oxycontin deplete from your body? And it would give me like this list of vitamins and I would take double of those vitamins because all I could remember is my mom's 2 kids.
Yeah.
Using while I was pregnant. And I remember I had this slight, I don't know if it may be a spiritual awakening or a spiritual moment, that I had this moment where, because I always used to use so much of my anger towards my mom to fuel my using. It was my excuse. And then it turned on me because I always said, I'm never going to be anything like my mom. And I became everything that she was. And I hated myself for it. And I really think that that is just such a clear example of this disease, is that I wanted to not be something so bad, but I became all of it. And then I hated myself even more for it. So it drove me even deeper into it. But I had this moment that I was I know that I love my baby. I know that I want her to be healthy, but I can't stop.
So you started to see this is what my mom must have felt like.
Maybe she felt like that. But then it went away really quickly, but it was just this moment because I felt so helpless, and I gratefully gave birth to a very healthy baby, and I immediately, the day after I gave birth, I started taking pills again, and I took her to her 5-day visit at the doctor's. And I completely was nodding out at the doctor's. And I remember I had the clipboard in my hand and I kept trying to fill it out. And I couldn't understand why my hand was just going up the clipboard. And the doctors were coming in and looking. And I didn't even know anything about DCF. I didn't know that they will take your baby. But they will take your baby. Yeah. We get home and we get a phone call. And it's DCF. And they're like, you need to come in tomorrow. You need to drop a urine. I went in, I dropped dirty for 4 different things. I was doing Coke, I was eating pills, I was smoking weed, I was drinking. It was all these things, and I had an infant in the house. On October 24th of 2007, DCF walked in my door and took my daughter from me, and I had never had her since. She is 14 now. She's going to be 15 in July. So I had lost that child. And then right after I lost her, 3 weeks later, I found out I was pregnant again. And I was pregnant with my son. And I just remember literally hitting my knees oh my God, what am I going to do? DCF was starting to come to our door all the time because we had a case plan and my kid's dad's mom had our daughter. And so I had this open case. So they kept trying to come and I was avoiding court because now I'm continuing to use. Now my kid's gone and now I really am lost. And I found out I'm pregnant again. So we ended up packing up our stuff and leaving in the middle of the night and going to Atlanta, Georgia, so that I could go to the hospital as a walk-in because I had no prenatal care since I was here because I was so afraid that DCF would flag me being pregnant. And so I went the entire pregnancy with my son with no prenatal care and while using, having gotten pregnant 4 months later, which is already in itself dangerous. I was taking so many pills. I was eating Oxycontin. I was taking morphine. I was doing all these things. My relationship with my kid's dad was terrible. It was physical. It was just horrible. I remember one time, and it's just so crazy how strong the drugs are, we were driving. We had just went and picked up a bunch of pills, and I'm probably about 7 months pregnant. This is just before we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and we're at an intersection about to make a left into our apartment building, and I've got the bag of pills on my lap, ready to get out of our car and go in the house and use. And we get in an argument about something. And as I'm stopped at the intersection, there's all these cars going back and forth. He reaches over and grabs the bag of pills and gets out of the car and takes off. I put the car in park, 7 months pregnant, get out and go chasing after him down the middle of the street. Like crazy. I can't even imagine what that looks like. Like people were, and I get back in the car, I get back to the house and I get high and then we end up going to Atlanta. And I remember when we got to Atlanta and then I went into labor, I remember how humiliating it is to walk into a hospital with no prenatal care, on drugs.
What does that mean? I'm just unfamiliar with childbirth.
Okay, so prenatal care is like you have to go to the doctor every month. You get blood work to make sure that the baby's getting enough nutrients, to make sure that the placenta where the baby is getting its food is intact, to make sure that you have enough fluids, to make sure that you're eating and drinking properly. They do a Down syndrome check. They just make sure that you're healthy, that you and the baby are healthy. I mean, I could have been bleeding internally and not known it. They catch those things. You do make sure that they give you prenatal vitamins and different things and provide services if you need them through your pregnancy. And I just didn't do any of those things.
And you just walked in there like, it's coming out. I just walked
in. I'm like, I'm in labor. And they were just like, and, I went back there and as I'm about to have him, the doctor's stitching me up and he's like, I remember he says, you should be married to have a baby.
The doctor said that to you?
It was a Christian hospital in Georgia. So it was, he was like, you should be married, having a baby. He's like, I don't know how you went through your whole pregnancy without having any care. He's like, you could tell he was so frustrated. And I'm like, just looking down there and I can hear my son crying and screaming because he was detoxing from the pills. But I don't think the hospital wanted to deal with it.
Did they know? You think they test the blood of the child for drugs?
Well, usually they're supposed to. Usually they do a drug test on me, but this is what saved me. So not saved me, but
let you slide by. Yeah.
Is I went to one doctor's visit when I was pregnant with Tyson. And when I went there, I got a prescription for Percocet because I have a cyst on my spine.
Yeah.
And so he gave me, so I had that one prescription of these measly 5 milligram Percocets, like 10 of them for like 9 months ago. So say why you have
opiates in your
system. So I was like, oh yeah, it's from that. And they just let it slide. Yeah, they ended up letting me go home with him. And my kid's dad and I we couldn't, it just was, we were living in a hotel room in like the ghetto in Atlanta. And so his mom called us right before Thanksgiving and she's like, I'm going to let you guys come and visit your daughter. And we had a no contact order, so we were not allowed to be there. She was going to do us a favor and let us see her. So she's like, I'll come up to Atlanta and I'll pick you up and I'll drive you back and you can spend some time with her. And then you guys got to leave. And we're like, okay. So she comes and gets us, drives us down there. So DCF calls and they're like, oh, we're going to come do a check just before Thanksgiving just to make sure everything's okay. So his mom panics and gives 2 addicts $600 in cash and the keys to her car and says, go stay busy for 4 hours until she comes and goes. So we went straight to the doctor.
Yeah.
And we got a bottle of Xanax, which anytime one of us takes Xanax, somebody's going to jail.
Yes. My
kid's dad took like 5 right off the bat. And I mean, he got so violent and intolerable when we got back to his mom's house that we had to put him in a hotel room because we were scared of him. And I remember when that happened, I hadn't talked to my aunt, my mom's sister, in like probably 10 or 15 years. I called her and I was like, hey, do you think I can come visit for Thanksgiving? I'm only about an hour away in Orlando. She was in Daytona. And she's like, yeah, come and see us. That would be nice. So I came with my son. And while I was there, I told her a little bit about what was going on. And I had an open case with our daughter. I was like, I'm really ready to get clean.
And so DCF doesn't know about Tyson?
No, not yet. They didn't know about him yet. I had been hiding, you know, and but we did have the open case plan with Peyton. But there was like some idea that I was pregnant with another child. I'm sure, the grandmother told them. And, rightfully so. It's protection of the kids.
Of course.
I look back now, but at that time I was so angry, and I felt like when they took Peyton, that the grandmother did everything that she could to make sure that I would never even have an opportunity to get her back. Like I always had felt angry that she didn't step in. She knew that my mom was all messed up. She knew my dad wasn't around. Not that it's her responsibility, but there was no chance.
Yeah, she wasn't giving you a second chance.
No,
Yeah.
and considering, and by no means being a victim at all, but like I didn't learn life skills as a child that's needed as an adult to be able to know how, like I didn't know how to pay bills. I didn't know how to put gas in the car. I didn't know how to clean a house. I didn't know how to make a bed. I didn't know how to cook a meal. I didn't know how to do any of those things. The only time I had ever learned how to clean a house when I was living at my best friend's when my mom went to jail was we had chores. And that was the only time. I remember she gave me a toilet brush and I didn't even know what it was.
Wow.
My mom did all those things when I lived with her, as far as even laying my clothes out. Like she was just always so high. That's all she wanted to do was just
clean.
Do stuff and clean. And she was crazy with it. So I get to my aunt's and I was like, I want to get clean. I called DCF on myself and I was like, it's true. I've had another kid. Within 2 hours, DCF showed up at my aunt's house ready to take Tyson. They're like, we're not playing with you. My aunt's like, hold on. Let me be the guardian. I'll keep my eye on them until and I wanted to go to treatment, until she gets into treatment. So I lived in my aunt's for 2 months. In that 2-month time period, my uncle and her were having some issues. It's my mom's blood sister, so my uncle's not my blood. He started to make like these sexual passes and comments to me. And my uncle's a retired NASCAR driver and he had crashed and shattered his shoulder. So he would get pain pills all the time. And so he started hiding pain pills throughout the house for me. And he would text me like clues to where they were, because Monday through Thursday, he would drive from Daytona back to West Palm Beach to his auto body shop and stay for 4 days. And so every day that he was gone, he would call me to tell me where all the drugs were. So I went into treatment, and my aunt obviously never knew about this. No one knew, my 2 cousins. And I went into treatment. I stayed there for 11 months. I got full custody of my son back.
You stayed there for how long?
11 months.
I love that.
I know. Yeah. I don't know what this 30-day thing is. People are like, 28 days, 30 days. I was like, yeah, I've always done like chunks of time.
Yeah.
I did, I didn't stay in transitions very long, but, in Daytona, I did the 11 months. It was Project Warm, Women Assisting Recovering Mothers. It was amazing.
Wow.
It was such an amazing place. I mean, it changed my life, Unfortunately, I didn't stay clean after that. But I did the one thing that, that they say you don't do is you got to get honest and stay away from old people, places, and things. And I wanted my kid's dad to be a dad so bad. I wanted a family so bad, and I also thought that getting to him would get back to my daughter. When I was there, though, at the treatment center, DCF said to me, if you want to have a case plan with your son, you have to sign full custody of your daughter over. You have to relinquish your rights. And they made me make that choice. They said, or you could have the potential of losing both kids. So I signed my daughter over, and I left there after 11 months, and I got another job at a gym. I got a job at a clothing store. I was doing really good. I was going to meetings. I was doing all these things in a 12-step program that they suggest that you do. But I wasn't honest about still continuing to talk to my kid's dad, and he was using. And it's so true that someone will get you high before you get you clean. And I had not been honest about it for so long that I had backed myself into a corner that when he called me and said, if you want to get high, I'll get you high, I was so afraid to call someone because I had been lying for so long. And I ended up getting high for the first time and sticking a needle in my arm.
And like sometimes we have reservations that we don't know are reservations.
Yeah.
Like you're not continuing this relationship because you want to use with him. You're continuing because you think that you can save him.
Yeah.
And if you tell someone else, they're going to tell you not to, but you think you know what's best. So you keep doing this and then.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that there's also that piece of like that old behavior that I couldn't save my mom, so I'm going to try to save you now. And I've learned that we pick people that mimic like our parents in some way. And I have always picked men that were just like my mom, someone that I could save.
My therapist always says like we always relive our childhood. So like even if our childhood is fucked up, it's what's comfortable to us.
Yeah.
So as adults, we remake it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like if you grew up in a household of secrets, when you get older, you feel comfortable with secrets. If
Yeah.
you grew up in a household with someone who's erratic and crazy that you're always trying to chase, you end up having that. So.
Yeah. Even though it's like we learn what we see, and we totally mimic that. And I totally did that. I found someone that I can seek validation in trying to fix. I obviously could never fix him. And I ended up sticking a needle in my arm for the first time, and everything changed.
How old?
I was 24. I was 24, and which was a little bit older in to some degree.
If you're from Florida, it's pretty old.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're from Florida, New Jersey, Ohio,
I was way late to the game with that, but probably thank God, because like once that happened, like that was like I am balls to the wall kind of person, and it's like I stuck the needle in my arm for the first time. Within 3 months, I lost Tyson. Well, maybe not exactly like that. We ended up back in Decatur, Georgia. We were the only white people. And 2 weeks before we moved in there, my neighbor had told me that there was a guy shot and killed in front of my door in a gang issue. And like, it's Decatur, I was told, is like the number one gang place, like in the US or in Georgia or something like that. Like it was a really bad area. And so it was me and Tyson and my kid's dad. And we're living in this apartment, and my kid's dad's father owned the complex. He was like a construction, like a GC, and they owned these, and they fixed them up and rented the whole property out. And so he had allowed him to go up there and work so we could live for free. At this place, my kid's dad stole my paycheck and then stole my car and then went to jail and left Tyson and I there completely by ourselves. And I had no money. I had no car. I had no idea really where I was.
In a dope habit.
In a dope hole.
Are you shooting everything at this point?
Anything. Yeah. Everything. The needle has become the addiction.
Yeah.
At this point, it was, I was shooting crack. I was shooting pills. I was shooting coke. I was shooting whatever that you could give me. I would smoke crack. It didn't really matter. I just never drank. That was the one.
Me too.
And I never smoked cigarettes. I was like, ew. It's like stuff stinks. And I was like, ew, drunks are so obnoxious. Yeah, like meanwhile, like I can't stand up straight. Yeah. And I'm, knocking everything over. And I mean, it's just so funny, like how the brain works. And
I felt the same way.
Yeah.
I'd push like a dirty crack pipe with a like chore dripping out the side of my mouth, but like hardcore alcohol, that was gross.
Yeah, exactly.
Bourbon, I'm not drinking that.
Yeah, or like the same thing. My fingers would be so dirty from them, and I'd be like, "Ew, cigarettes are so gross," and my fingers are bleeding from the chore and the dirt.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I used to have like super callus.
Yeah, from flicking the lighter.
From flicking the lighter and from holding the stem.
Oh, yeah. Or the stem's like this big, and you're like, it's still good.
It's burning you.
Yeah, and
you got to put electrical tape on one side.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah, for sure. Or I would take needles and resharpen them on either a matchbook or the sidewalk or a nail file and use them. I've broken needles off in my arm from being so dull and just keeping trying.
Are they still in there?
Oh, yeah. And I can't even remember where it is. I think it's right over here. Yeah. It's still in there.
It's funny because like in recovery, it's like I meet people all the time. They're like, "Yeah, I still got a couple needles broken off in there."
No big deal. Yeah, it's just another day.
But we get clean 90 days, and if someone like steps on my new shoes, I'll kill them.
Yeah, but and it's funny. People say that they're like, you guys complain about this, you stepping on something dirty, and then you guys used to like suck for money and all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, but that's the thing is it's like who I was not really who I was. Like me doing those things I was doing that against my will.
Of course.
Like I was in those dirty places, not because I was okay with it, but because the drugs were more important than any of that. So when I do get clean, I do have the choice to like not, walk around barefoot outside or, like in a filthy place or like put myself in those places, or I don't have to use the public bathroom at the dirtiest gas station I could find just because like I have to use the bathroom. Like I could drive a little bit farther down. It's not that I'm better than, it's just things have changed.
Yeah, I get it.
And so when I was in Georgia, like this was a pivotal moment for me in my addiction is having nothing and learning how to use my body for money and for manipulation. Like I had never prostituted. I didn't really know much about it. I had heard things about it. I hadn't really met anyone that had done it, but my mom used to talk about it. And remembering that, she would always say, I used to have to go walk the streets to get money and da-da-da-da and all this stuff. And so I'd always remembered that.
Wow, so that just came back.
It just came back. I needed money. I wanted to get high and nothing else mattered. And I was going to figure it out. And I remember I had talked to my neighbors like 2 or 3 times. And so I was like, well, they'll watch Tyson. And so I went and I knocked on their door. And it was a couple, her husband and her, and they had like 2 small kids, I think. And I was like, do you think you could watch him for about an hour? Tyson was probably 16 months at the time. And I was like, you think you could watch him for an hour? I got to go to the store. I'll be right back. And she's like, yeah, no problem. I had no idea who this woman was. I mean, but I was totally fine with it. I left him in the house and I started walking. And I'm just like walking. And I remember being nervous, and I was like, I'm like, it's fine. I'm like, it's going to be fine, and some guy stops, and I get in his car, and he's like, let's go back to your place. And I was like, okay. So I take him back to my place, show him where I live. I'm all by myself. And when I get him back, when I get back to my place, I was like, hold on 1 second. Let me go get my son from next door. When I got next door, the couple was screaming, fighting.
Wow.
I walked in the door and my son was cowered in a corner.
Scared.
Terrified. And I remember grabbing him and running out and then taking him and putting him upstairs. It was a 2-story townhouse or apartment or something. Put him upstairs in the pack and play. And went back downstairs with the guy and the guys. And I'm like, all right, and he's like, well, I don't have any money, but I have drugs. I'm like, excellent. What do you have? I'm like, perfect.
We just skipped the step.
Yeah, we just skipped, exactly. He's like, well, I've got some crack and I've got a half an oxy 80. I was like, all right, that was still getting me high, half an oxy 80. So I was like, all right, and I'm like, well, can I get high first? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I get high first, and now I'm standing there, and now the reality sets in of what I'm about to have to do.
And you killed him?
I wasn't at that place in my addiction yet. That gets later in the story now. And I was like, and I looked at him and I was like, I don't think I could do this. And he's like, what do you mean you don't think you can do this? It's like this big black guy in Decatur, Georgia. And he's like older and he looks like he does not play. And I was like, I don't think I could do it. He's like, you're extremely lucky that I don't rape you or kill you.
Wow.
He says, but I'm going to leave. And I don't remember everything else that he said, but I just remember I was totally locked up. I completely panicked. And I remember calling my dad, and I was like, Dad, I have to get out of here. Like, I was scared now he knew where I lived. And I started to get sick. I called my dad. I was like, Dad, please help me. And he called around to some programs and got me into a program down here, South that you could bring your child to. I had to make it one more night. And I had to find my own way from Georgia to Hollywood. I remember Tyson, I was laying on the couch, so sick. And I remember Tyson was crying and he kept like running at me. And I remember I was so sick, I just hit him dead in the chest with my hand, like, get away from me. He just looked at me and was just so like confused and just started screaming. The next day, I ended up getting some drugs, waiting on my dad, or waiting on trying to figure it out. And this is where active addiction like took me. I loved my son so much. I remember being pregnant with him, and he was only one of my 3 kids, well, 4 now, but 3 that I didn't want to have an abortion with. Like, I was going to keep him. Was going to raise my son. I was going to get clean, and I felt connected to him, and it just went so south, and I remember after I got drugs, I was standing at the kitchen counter, and Tyson was standing in front of me with his arms up, jumping up and down, crying like he wanted me to pick him up. I had to get high first, and I got high, and I put the needle, and I put the stuff back down. I picked Tyson up, and he just gripped me and held on to me, and he stopped crying. And I remember I was like, then I had to get high again. Like, the drugs started to wear off. And so I would peel him off of me and put him back down. I remember he would just scream and scream. And I remember in that moment, I started crying. I wanted to love him so bad, and I just couldn't. I was so incapable. The sheer powerlessness that happens with drugs, where it's just no longer, like, I am no longer in control of what I'm doing. Like, I am truly caught in the grips of my disease. It's not about not taking responsibility for what's happening in that moment, but it was just truly the fact that in that moment, I couldn't stop. I ended up finding some guy and getting a ride down to this treatment center. I did 6 months in this treatment center. I ended up getting in a fist fight with 2 girls, got kicked out, broke my hand, got Percocet from my handbrake, and just took off again. And I
I didn't know you had hands.
Yeah. I've broken my hand 6 times. I have 6.
In fist fights?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
Wow. I have a crushed knuckle on my right hand. I used to fight a lot towards the end. And because I had been abused for so long, and I'll tell you what happened. But it was, anyway, after, I got out of this place, and about 2 months later, my aunt calls me, who I had lived with for those 2 months.
Where's Tyson now?
Tyson's still with me. I leave the treatment center. I get kicked out. They want me to leave. I take Tyson. I get an old guy that I had known that used to give me money to pay for 3 months of an apartment for me to get on my feet. And I get into this apartment, and I start using again, and my aunt calls me, and she's like, why don't you let Tyson come and stay with us for like a week, and you get yourself a car and get yourself together and all this stuff, and then I'll send him back to you. I was like, oh, that sounds great. Now I can use without him being there, for a week. And I send him up there. He's 17 months old. I've never seen him or talked to him again. He's 13 now. Wow. Actually, he's 14. He'll be 15 in September.
Have you tried to reach out to him?
Every year that I've been clean.
And he doesn't want to talk to you?
He doesn't know who I am. So
his family doesn't want you to talk to him?
No.
Or his caretakers?
Yeah, which is my aunt, my mom's sister. You've
been clean how long now?
Almost 7 years and 2 months.
So you've been trying for 7 years, and they still are like, no?
Yep. So the reason, not only are they so angry because of what I've done, obviously, but my aunt looks at me like my mom. My mom has 5 brothers and sisters. Well, there's my mom and my aunt, and then there's 3 brothers. And my aunt is the only one who's not an addict. She's the only one. So she's filled with so much resentment and anger and hatred and guilt, or not guilt, but just shame of the family. And she feels so much better than, and, she's, I will say it, she's an awful person. She's just so hateful. She's always treated me poorly since I was a child. I used to go over there. My mom would take me over there to spend time with my cousins, and my aunt would always make comments to me. Because my mom was a vegetarian and a vegan way before anybody knew anything about it. She was super crazy, crazy with it. You couldn't have any meat in the house. My stepdad and I would always go off and sneak and get food and stuff. And so there was never any good food in my house. I had alfalfa and faking bacon or phony bologna sandwiches and stuff, almond milk. And so when I would go to my aunt's house, she loved, they had so many snacks. And I would literally just raid their cabinets, eat their Slim Jims and candies and chips and all this stuff. And she would be like, you're going to eat us out of house and home. Why you got to eat all our food? And I was 8, and it just she'd always made me feel so bad. Yeah. And my cousin would always, if we would jump on the trampoline together and my cousin would stub her little toe, she would start screaming, crying, and say I pushed her. And then I would get yelled at. She was a terrible tattletale about nothing. It was just, they were spoiled brats. So when my aunt let me live there, it was a shock. But, so she called me and she was like, I'll watch Tyson. And then, when I never saw him again, when she did that, I got really messed up, and I called her and I left a message on her answering machine, how her husband was making sexual comments to me and giving me pills because he fucking hates you. He also offered to give me your glass dildo that you didn't want to take to treatment, you fucking bitch. I was said all these things. I don't remember any of it.
You're just fucked up.
I was so messed up. I just wanted to get back at her. And of course she didn't believe me, or chose not to believe me. And so she doesn't want anything to do with me. I think even more.
But he's old enough that you can reach out to him on your own. No?
Well, he's 15. The thing is I don't, it's a touchy thing because he doesn't know who I am. He calls Stephanie, my aunt, his mom. And so he doesn't, that's his mom, and my cousins are his brothers, or his sisters. And so I don't know if he remembers.
So you think that he might believe that that's his real mom, or he just calls her mom?
Well, so my half-brother was raised by my mom's mom, and he called her mom. He was taken when he was 2. And he didn't supposedly know that his mom, which was our mom, until he was way older. So I always have that scenario in my mind that my family's repeating the same horrible pattern. But the thing that makes me feel like he has to know that it's not is because my oldest daughter, whom I got to meet for the first time, it's like 6 months ago.
I remember.
She was seeing Tyson up until, like, I guess 10 years ago. A memory came up on Facebook that the grandmother sent me from 10 years ago that they were playing, and they were in the middle of the custody battle at that time for my aunt getting Tyson. And my aunt wanted my kid's mom to tell DCF that he was a piece of crap and that he wasn't, he was doing criminal behavior and that he wasn't a fit parent. And she was like, no, I'm not doing that. It's my son. You don't need me to do that, to have custody of him. And she's like, well, then you're never going to see him again. And she's never let Peyton see her again.
Wow.
And Peyton tried to call over there a couple years ago. And she said, Tyson doesn't remember you. Don't call here anymore. And so I'm assuming that when they saw each other at that time, that maybe he realized, he was, I think, 3. So it's possible that he maybe had some idea. I have so many unanswered questions, so much guilt, which has gotten better.
So when they take Tyson, what happens?
So when she takes Tyson, my whole world fell apart. I couldn't get off the floor. There comes a point in using when the drugs no longer work. Like, you just can no longer deny the pain that's inside of you and the reality of where life is. And my using took off. I didn't try to get clean again for 8 years. And in that 8 years is when all the things in life that I didn't even know existed to the bottoms that people could go, like, I went to. I went from using and being like a pretty young girl, I did some really shitty things, and I tried to have sex with men for money, and like I stole, and but I was never like in real bad crack houses. Like, I lived in Georgia for like a month, and I was still, my place, my little spot was clean, like I was still like that. And then after I lost Tyson, like everything changed. I ended up, God, it's such a blur. Honestly, like so much of it, like what ended up happening. But what I can remember is the last few years, I started meeting men, and I started having sex with these men for money and for drugs. I would start dating like drug dealers, and I started dating this guy in Hollywood that was selling a bunch of coke, and then he would give me drugs and stuff, and I would stay there, and then I would bounce around. And I went to detox, and when I was in detox, I met this guy. And because I was really good at that, and I met this guy, and we left together, and he's like, oh, let's go get some heroin. He's like, fuck those pills. He's like, I got something better for you. He's like, do you got any money? I called a guy that I knew. He drove up, he dropped us off $100. And I was like, well, I can get $100. So we took off. We went and met this guy. His name is Billy. He's passed away now. We go to his house. The guy drops off a couple bags of heroin, and I was like talking to people that weren't there. I was fucked up. And I was like, this is where I need to be. And I remember passing out, and all of a sudden I wake up, that guy is gone and left me by myself in this random guy's house. I get up and I walk out, and he's like, do you have anywhere to go? And I was like, no. I think I was 27. I had nowhere to go. And he's like, well, you could just live here. He's like, but I need to tell you that I have HIV since you're using needles in this house. And he's like, and I have Hep C, so I need you to be very careful. He was a really good man. Despite all the things, he actually had done 27 years in prison in New York for aggravated robbery. And he was a nice guy, but he let me live there, without having to have sex with him. And we went to doctors and got pills, and I would just keep getting high when I was there. And,
he would shoot pills too, or he'd snort them?
Oh, no, he was definitely, he was what really honed my skills in shooting up. I mean, he really taught me he schooled me on all that, and schooled me on the doctors and all that stuff. And then one of his guy bunkies that was in prison with him was getting out, and he let him come and stay there. And he was this young, really good looking guy. Billy was older and HIV positive. And so this guy moved in, and I was like, and he didn't do pills. He didn't really even use drugs. He was also in there for
aggravated robbery.
Well, I don't think it was aggravated because he only did like 7 years, but it was something to that degree.
Yeah.
And he moved in, and he's like, I'll get you clean. Why don't you leave with me? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to get clean. We're going to leave together. We left Billy's house with nowhere to go and no money. And I'm like so sick. And we're sleeping outside on a pool deck of some like condominium building, like outside. And I'm just like, this is amazing with you. And I'm like, you know, and like I wanted to get clean.
Brokeback Mountain.
Yeah. It was terrible, you know, and I remember just being homeless walking around with him, but it ended up, he was from Jacksonville. And so we ended up taking a Greyhound to Jacksonville, and we lived there for a couple months. And it's crazy because we got there, we lived there for a while. I supported him. He had a warrant for his arrest, so he couldn't get a job. So he just hung out outside drinking beer all day, and I would go to work. And I always was able to, when I had my somewhat shit together and wasn't like smoking crack and shooting pills, like I've always had good jobs. I've always had the ability to get a good job. And I got a job at a construction company doing all their payroll and stuff, and I was making pretty decent money, for that area. And I got us an apartment. We did for 7 months, and he got really drunk one night and beat my ass. Wow. Like it was crazy. We were in the middle of having sex, and he's like on me, and all of a sudden he just like a flip
goes
the
black.
Switch and just starts punching me in the face, dragging me by my hair all around the house, throws me outside, starts hitting me with sticks. I'm outside, I'm butt naked, just like for a good solid hour. Finally, I somehow get away. The neighbor hears it or something, calls the cops. He takes off running. The cops take me to a women's shelter. I call my mom. My mom and I had been talking here and there. I call my mom. My mom comes up, gets me on a Greyhound bus to drive me back to Palm Beach. Now I'm stealing methadone out of my mom's bag the whole time. She's like, well, look away. I'll sneak some methadone out, take a bunch. By the time we get to West Palm from Jacksonville.
The wafers?
No, the little 10 milligram pills. Mm-hmm. My mom was getting them from the doctor. So my mom had fallen off a seawall and broke her hip, and she was so messed up that she didn't know it was broken. So she didn't go to the hospital for like 4 days. So she walked, one leg was shorter than the other. And she would get the methadone from the doctor. That was her pain medicine because she was already on the clinic. So that's all they could give her. So I'm like stealing all her methadone. So by the time we got to West Palm from Jacksonville, I'm so fucked up. We get into the hotel, and she's like, starts telling me that, how dare I lose my kids? My son Tyson has asthma. She's like, you gave him asthma because you couldn't stop using it and all this stuff. And I like couldn't believe she was saying this. I was like, bitch, one of your kids died because of the way you used. And one of them is so physically deformed, he can't even stand up straight. I blacked out. I knocked out some of my mom's teeth. I came to because I got tased by the cops. I was on top of my mom. And anyway, they took me to jail. My mom wanted to press charges. She was like, gonna press charges. And it was so she bonded me out.
It's crazy. You knocked out her teeth?
Yeah. She like all the bottom of her teeth were gone. They were probably loose anyway from all her drug use. I mean, I'm not going to think like her, not gonna lie. I mean, who knows, you know? But she was like, she was so messed up and just so sad from the whole thing. She bonded me out and then pulled out of the jail like a block later, and she goes, get out. And I was like, well, what am I going to? She goes, I don't give a fuck. Get out.
That's the relationship.
Yeah, you know, and I got out, and I went and met some guy, and he ended up being a pimp. And he had like another girl, and I learned about Backpage. And that was like my first introduction to guys going online and being able to buy a girl and come over and give you some money. And it was like super easy. So I started doing that. And I was getting high continuously still. My mom and I were not doing good. She was still going to press charges. And my ex that beat me up really bad, he's like, my cousin wants you to come up here and go to the doctor to get some pills. So come back to Jacksonville, go to the doctor, get your pills, and you can go back home.
What did he ever say about beating you?
Nothing. He just said he doesn't remember. He blacked out. He's like, I'm so sorry. You know, and I was like, fuck you. I'm not coming back to you, but I'll go up and get the pills because I could definitely use that. I was going to go for the money, you know. That obviously didn't happen. I went up there. I went to the doctor. And instead of I got all the pills, and instead of selling them, I ended up doing them all.
I hate it when that happens.
I know. It's never works out the way that I plan, ever. And so I was like, well, now I'm leaving Jacksonville. I'm going back down. So I like try to get away from my ex, and I go to get into a cab. in this parking lot, and it's a van. And I remember I'm putting my stuff to the left of me in the van, and the door was still open. Well, the cab starts to drive a little bit, and we're going super slow because it's over a speed bump. And all of a sudden, the cab driver says to me, he looks in the rear view, he's like, "Ma'am, there's a man running full speed at the car." And I was like, I went to go turn back to my right to slide the van door shut. And I was like, "Hit the gas." And he hits the gas. And at the same time, my ex grabs my arm. I didn't get a chance to, and he rips me out of the van. And the van rolled over my leg and broke my leg.
Jesus.
And knocked me out on the concrete. And the van takes off. It's got all my stuff in it. You know, one of the millionth times I've lost everything I own in one fell swoop, you know, and breaks my leg. Now, the day before when I got the pills, and this is where my life changed.
He fronted you the money to get the pills?
Yeah, his cousin. So like we do this, the doctor shopping.
Yeah.
So someone will sponsor you to take you to a doctor, and they'll give you like a quarter of your pills and take the rest.
Yeah.
Or give you cash, you know, whichever it is that you want. I took the pills because I thought that I could get more if I sold them. But just when I got the pills, I went to this person's house. It's this really nice area called Hooterville in Jacksonville. It's a trailer park. Very lovely place. And I was in there, and I remember there's a bunch of people in there, and somebody was on the phone and then hung up the phone, and he was like, "Oh my God." And everyone's like, "What?" And he's like, "Chad's getting out." And I remember the whole room went silent. Like the energy in the room changed. And I was like, and they're like, how is Chad getting out, like, of jail? And nobody knew. And it was just like, the room was like an eerie silent. And I was like, "Who is this guy, Chad?" I was like, "What happened?" They're like, "Well, he kidnapped a 9-month pregnant girl, wrapped her in saran wrap and stuck her in a closet." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, well, she robbed him for like 300 of his Roxys." And I guess some things happened. I found out later that one of his guys had gone to the hospital and threatened her when she had the baby, that "I'll drop your baby off this roof if you testify." And she dropped the charges, and he got out. So we were standing there, and all of a sudden a car pulled up, and this guy, like this really good looking like guy, comes in there, and like his demeanor and his just way of being made me feel something that the drugs had not made me feel for a really long time. Like something, like I was very intrigued, and I wanted to know more.
Was this Chad?
Yeah.
Jeez,
Chad got there.
crazy.
Yeah. And I came to find out he was a high-ranking blood member from New York, and he had come down to Jacksonville on some business of some things and had stayed there for a while. He came in, and all of a sudden, like, everybody was like doing anything that he needed. They were giving him pills. Someone handed him a prescription. Someone was like, "Do you need a gun? And it was like this whole thing. And I was just sitting there like, wow, this is nice. Who is this person? And he just started talking to me, and we talked, and then my ex and I left. And that's when that happened with the van. And I ended up in the hospital, obviously. So word got back to Chad that had happened. And he was like, "Oh, that girl was pretty. Somebody go pick her up from the hospital and bring her back to me." So I went back to Chad, and Chad's passed away now. So, and he literally came outside when the car pulled up, picked me up out of the car, and carried me into the house and handed me like 8 Roxys and was like, "Here, take care of your leg. Can I get you something to do?" He was like so nice to me and took care of me. And and he was like this, you know, guy on the streets that like had anything that he wanted, and the way people treated him. And I was like, this is great. And then about a week, the charges for my mom.
Did you get a cast on your leg?
Yeah, I had like a brace on there. And I was bruised on the right side of my body from when I came out. I was bruised from like half my cheek all the way down. Like it was black. It had looked like when you put your arm like straight out in front of you, like all the liquid was under my arm. It was just black under there. It was just super crazy. So when I had come to Jacksonville, I was having to report every week for the charges that I was on. I was going to go to Jacksonville, get the pills, and come back super quick before I had to report. But all that happened, and I didn't make it back. So they put a warrant out for my arrest on those charges. And then about a week later, after being in Jacksonville, my mom died. My mom nodded out on her bicycle, got hit by a car, and was killed in Palm Beach. And it was just gone like that, you know? And I remember being so angry. I was like, "You're fucked up my whole life, and then you just leave like that?" And then I felt like I had nothing to go back to. So I was going to stay in Jacksonville. I remember one night there was a guy sleeping on the couch. I had got up to get some water. I had full clothes on. I go to and I pick up the guy's leg, move his leg to get by him in the dark, get a cup of water, go back into the room, and Chad wakes up and he punched me straight in the face and literally lifted me off of my feet for touching that guy's leg.
Wow.
So how dare you touch another man? I was like shocked. And I was so scared because of who I had seen him as who he was. I was so afraid to do anything. So I stayed. And we started going to doctors. And the violence, it got worse.
Worse than that?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And it changed me as a human, as a woman, as a person. It changed my perception of life completely. We were in all kinds of things. We were making meth. We were doing counterfeit money. We were selling pills. We were selling heroin. And I was his property. And I don't know if he was racist against white people. He was black. And because he would get really fucked up and start saying all these racist things about white people and then just beat me over it. And just nothing I did was right. I couldn't do anything right. If he asked me to do this and I did that, it was wrong because he really actually meant this. And then after he would do it, he would give me drugs and he would just lay on my lap and he would cry and he would tell me that he couldn't help it. And, that he loved me like he never loved anybody and all this stuff. And I got pregnant with his kid. And you would think that would make him stop. And it didn't. And I did not want that child. I did not want that child. I completely mentally disconnected from that child. I used drugs to kill her. I did not want her. I didn't want anything to do with him. And
he beat you while you're pregnant?
Yeah. I mean, there was times that he took me out to an apartment place. He decided that he would go I can't explain what would happen with me. He would just get super fucked up. And something would go wrong on the outside with him, and he would come home and take it out on me. And I remember I was about 5 or 6 months pregnant, and he decided that he was going to act like he was going to kill me. So he got 4 of his guys and him and drove me out to an apartment out in the middle of Jacksonville in the woods and was out there and just hitting me and all this stuff. And he picked up a tire iron or one of those wrenches, those huge metal wrenches, and and I remember brushed it down the side of my cheek. And he's like, when I get back from the store, he's like, I'm going to break your jaw with this. I just remember sitting there and him and his friends left. And as soon as they left, I had no shoes on. I had just a t-shirt and a pair of boxers. I had nothing else. As soon as he left, I heard that car leave. There was a girl that he had asked to watch me. I punched her as hard as I possibly could, and I took off and I ran out the front door. I ran through the woods for I don't even know how long. I ended up all of a sudden coming out into an intersection, and I see a gas station right there, and I run to the gas station. I run inside and I lock the door. And I'm like, somebody call the cops, please, somebody call the cops. And the guy's like, what? I'm like, please, please. I'm covered in dirt. I'm freaking out. The cops end up coming. They take me to a shelter. I'm in the shelter. I go back to my dad's to Hollywood. He lets me come down there. The disease, man, I'm down there for a week. I tried to save up enough money to get an abortion. It was $800 because I was so far along. I was going upstairs and robbing this guy of his pills, and he was giving me money, and I was taking it. And as soon as I had enough money for the abortion, I went and smoked a bunch of crack and blew it all. And so I was like, well, fuck it. I'm going to go back to Chad.
Wow.
So he called me and he's like, why don't you come back and go to the doctor? Because I had a doctor that I was going to. And he's like, just come back. He's like, I'm sorry. I won't do that again. And da-da-da-da. And I went back. He ended up going to jail for breaking some guy's nose for something. And I ended up having the baby. I had the baby, no prenatal care, again. I ended up getting on the methadone clinic the last couple months that I was pregnant because I had been taking pills for so long that the doctor that I was going to getting the pills, when he found out I was pregnant, he sent me to the methadone clinic. I ended up at the methadone clinic. I gave birth to Jordan, my youngest. When I gave birth to her, I ended up moving in with this lady, and she just took care of me. Chad got out of jail, came back and got me, and I was with him. He kept accusing me of having sex with his cousin. It was like this whole thing. This was the last thing before I got away from him. I had already lost our daughter. He had taken a picture of me shooting up and sent it to DCF. They came and removed Jordan from our custody.
Why would he do that? Just because psychopath? Just
psychopath. Yeah, just to hurt me. Just to hurt me. And so I had lost Jordan. I just didn't give a shit about anything else. Mm-hmm. And when I lost her, and he kept accusing me of that. And one night we were sleeping, and all of a sudden he just flipped the lights on. I'm sleeping. He turns around and just kicks me straight in the face, breaks my nose, knocks out a few of my teeth, and for 7 straight days beat me. I'm partially deaf in my left ear. I have a piece broken in my neck, my lower spine. I've had my nose broken by him 6 times.
Wow.
He did things to me that that people would go to jail over an animal doing. He kept me hostage for 7 days, and he was telling people that I had gone back to Miami, and because he was planning on killing me. And his mom didn't believe him. And his mom's like, I know you've got that girl locked in a trunk somewhere, and I'm going to find her. And she never stopped looking for me in those 7 days. They had our daughter. After 7 days, he was so exhausted, and my face was the size of a basketball. I was unrecognizable. So he finally decided to stop. And he was tired, and he needed more drugs. So I convinced him that it was okay for him to go to work. When he went to work, the girl's house that we were staying at, who heard the whole thing all those days, never called the cops, came in and was like, his mom won't stop calling. You need to call her. She's going to send the cops over here. You need to do something. And I called her, and she sent a taxi, and I got in the way that I was, and I went over there, and I remember she's like, you need to call the cops. She's like, my son that is not okay. And her husband came home, his dad, and he hit his knees in front of me and was like, I just cannot believe it. He cauliflowered my ear. I had to have a needle stuck in it and have all the fluid drained out of it.
Oh my God.
It was the most painful, awful experience. He sexually assaulted me. It was just, it was horrible, obviously, and I wish I could say it was enough to get me clean. It just takes what it takes, I guess. Then after that, I ended up on the streets. I started jumping in and out of cars for money, prostituting. I was living from hotel to hotel. I would sell my mind, body, spirit, and soul. It didn't really matter. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about you. I didn't care about what I did to myself. I didn't care about what you did to me. I just wanted to get high. And I did that for a couple years, probably about 2 years. And I met this guy who had 4 houses full of girls. And I'm a pretty smart person. I'm good with computers. I'm good with all that stuff. And also I was good with my hands. Mm-hmm. And you get abused for so long, like you don't take that shit no more, and you have no problem putting your hands on somebody else. And I started working with him and handling all the girls and, handling all of setting the girls up on their dates and going out and being the person that would take the money and leave the girl. And I also did my share. There's no doubt in that. I did that.
It's called a bottom bitch.
Yeah. There's a name for it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, I did that for about a year, and I still got abused while I was there with him, if it didn't go his way, and, I get hit with objects, all of that stuff. I remember I couldn't stop going to jail in the end. And I went to jail, and this is where the system has continued to save my life, mm-hmm. because I went to jail. Well, I got robbed for like $500 from a date that I was supposed to be on. And I was so afraid to go back to the guy that I was working with no money that I panicked. And so who do I call? I called Chad. And Chad's like, Western Union's me some money. And he's like, why don't you just come back to Jacksonville? He's like, now, mind you, I had put Chad in jail. He did about a year. And he got out on an anklet.
Wow.
On an ankle monitor. Somebody bonded him out.
It's crazy. People only get years for shit like that.
No, he was going to go to prison. Uh-huh. But he got bonded out or something happened, and they let him out on an ankle monitor. His charges were aggravated sexual battery, kidnapping. The fact that he was out after a year was crazy. And thank God I went to jail, because I was so fucked up. Like, it didn't even, and also I've been doing my own thing for a while now, and I have been getting real good on the streets by that point. Because when he met me, I was a totally different person. And after what he did to me and then being on the streets with the girls, and I was in total, the streets had worn me down to that point. And so I was like, well, fuck that. I'll go back. Let him put his hands on me again, or whatever the case was.
You go back to Chad?
God saved me because I was going to. That's how crazy.
You got me fucked up.
It's so crazy. Right? It's just, I think that my ego wanted to take me back.
To be like, look, to be like me. I can handle it.
Like, I can handle it. Because his ex before him, they used to like fist fight with each other. She shot him, his ex before me. Like, shot him, because he did the same to her. But she kept going back for 7 years. Funny, her and I used together. She thanked me for taking him from her. And then her and I like got together, and then it was so crazy. Like, we were like together, and it was
dating.
Yeah. People were like, what the heck? Because when she was in prison, when he met me, and they were supposed to still be together. So I was like this extra girl, and she didn't know anything about me. And people were like, oh my God, Jess is going to flip out. And then she got out of prison, and she found out about me. Not only did she find out he had been seeing me, but I was pregnant. And she was like, I watched my back for a little while, that was for sure. I did not want to mess with her. But yeah, we started seeing each other. It was like this whole thing. So maybe my ego wanted me to go back and be like, like see what a different person I am, and all that stuff, and totally sick. And so I called him, and I was going to get on a Greyhound the next day to go to Jacksonville, but I decided that I was going to go get high one more time that night. This is just the insanity is, I went and I got high all night, and I was staying in this hotel with a bunch of guys, and there was the heroin dealer across the street, and the guy that I had dipped out giving him his money was like, whatever the case was. And I went across the street to get some heroin. And as I'm walking back, this guy comes running at me and pistol whips me in the back of my head and splits my whole head open right in the middle of the street in Orlando. I go and I try to stitch my own head up in the hotel because I didn't want to
go to the hospital. And I go to jail like that. I tried to steal some clothes from Walmart to clean clothes on. That's how I ended up in jail. I got rearrested 8 days later for trying to sell a girl to an undercover cop. And I remember that was it for me. And I remember it was like, I just felt so defeated. Like I was so done. I was 29 and I went to jail. I remember I called my dad and I was like, Dad, like I'm ready to get clean. And he like believed me. Something must have been in my voice. And he let me come and live with him. I stayed in jail for like 60 days. I got out and I came down to Hollywood and I slept on my dad's couch for my first couple months clean. My dad had no air conditioning in hot, sunny South Florida. And I was missing most of my teeth from what Chad had done. I was about 40 pounds overweight, heavier than I am now. I hadn't been to a nail salon or a hair place in like 10 years. I had not a single outfit to my name except the outfit that I had when I got out of jail. Nothing obviously fit me. I lived on donations my first year of getting clean. I worked making $8 an hour at a pizza place, and I walked to meetings, and I walked to try to lose weight. And it's been like a heck of a journey, man. In the last almost 7 years that I've been clean, I've been able to meet my oldest daughter for the first time. Every single year that Jordan?
I stay clean, my youngest daughter, Jordan, I met for the first time.
She's your oldest? My
oldest is Peyton.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Your oldest is Peyton.
Yeah, I probably said that confusing. You've got it. It's all like
we got like a couple of brain cells between us.
I know, right? Don't do drugs, kids. But yeah, I met my youngest daughter for the first time when she was 3, Jordan. She is 8 now. And I've had a relationship with her ever since. My oldest daughter, I met for the first time about 6 months ago. And with her, every single year that I stayed clean, I would email the grandmother, clean, just want to check in with you, and she'd be like, we're not ready in years. And the same with my aunt who has my son. I would text her and I would get nothing. And I remember one year, like 3 years ago, I texted her Merry Christmas because I would always find an excuse to text her. New Year's, Christmas, anything. And she texted me and she said, Merry Christmas.
That's cool.
And I was like, it was like the best Christmas gift I could ever get. Mm-hmm. I did some work on resentments and I wrote a forgiveness letter or a letter asking for forgiveness, an amends letter to my aunt, and actually mailed it to her. And she sent me back a text message and saying that she's happy that I'm clean and she appreciates the efforts, but by no means is anybody in her household ready to see me. I just have to keep trusting the process with my son. what being in recovery has shown me is that everything happens in God's time. Everything happens exactly the way it's supposed to. If I would have met my oldest daughter any sooner than when I would have met her, I wouldn't be able to have what I have with her right now. I may not have been able to stick it out. You know, I always would say, I just, no matter what, want to be consistent in my kid's life. Don't bring them in too soon to where I can't handle the feelings and I'm going to run.
What made you dive into the 12-step program? Because you're extremely involved. You sponsor women. I mean, you are, you know, someone in recovery that women look up to and ask for guidance. And like, how did that? Because obviously the 12-step program has been popping up in treatment centers and all this stuff. Yeah. And like, you don't really talk much about like ever really diving into it in the past. But like this time you dove into it. So
I never really did before. I never really genuinely tried to get clean. Like when I went to treatment that one time and like I worked like the first 2 steps, but I really wasn't involved, you know, nothing like I wasn't ready. You know, and I wasn't one of those people that tried, like, had been in and out and tried a few times. Like, I tried that one time and then I just never came back. Yeah. This is like my second real time trying to get clean. And I just remember coming in so absolutely beaten up. And all I wanted to do was look in the mirror and not cry and hate who I was. And I remember the first time that I went to a meeting, I picked up a white key tag. I felt like this. For the first time that I felt something in my life that I didn't want to run from. Like it was the first time like I had a feeling that felt like it might be what I had actually been searching for all those years out there. And I wanted more of it.
That's why, like, when people ask me like why I got clean, like that pretty much sums it up. Like in drugs, I was looking for something. And when I came into recovery, I found it. Yeah. Like I found what I had been looking for in drugs and everything and people. Like I finally got what I've been looking for. Yeah. And I really fell in love with the rooms. Like, just like I had thought I had fallen in love with drugs. Like, you know, when I first did crack, I was like, I'm in love. Like we're going to get married, you know? And like when I got clean, it was like that same feeling where it was like a high that never goes away. That is free, that like lasts forever. It was like everything I'd ever wanted in drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. It's indescribable. It's like it was the answer to the question that I've been asking all my life. When I got clean, on my 29th day clean, I was indicted on a RICO charge, which is the racketeering charge for all of the prostitution for the houses. I had 2 choices. I had to turn myself into jail and go to prison, or run and get high. And they talk about a gift of desperation in our program, that if you're desperate enough, you'll do anything that it takes. And it is really a gift. And I decided that going back to jail was better than going back out and using, you know, and also in that short time, in the 30 days that I had spent coming to meetings and raising my hand and going, having coffee with people and people loving me and making me feel comfortable in my own skin, like, I felt confident and safe enough to go to jail that if and when I got out, that at least I knew what I had to go back out to. It was the first time that it gave me something to go home to. I never had anything to go back to. Anytime I'd go to jail, I'd always have a hold in another county. So I'd always just go. I remember getting out of jail once in Orlando and just like hadn't been there in 5 years because I had a hold from an old charge. Getting out, looking left, looking right. I'm like, fuck it, left looks good. You know, and that's how I lived. You know, and just meeting people on the street and just going wherever, you know, and recovery and the meetings gave me like a foundation. It gave me a safe place. It started to give me some direction in life that I had never had.
Yeah, it really tethers you to like something safe where you can like run around all day and whatever. But like when you have that home group or you have that meeting you go to, like when you get there, it's like you slide into home plate. Yeah. You know?
Yep. I had shared in my home group last week, you know, coming there, I always see the people that just make me smile from the inside out. And that was such that I didn't even know what that meant. But I had to turn myself into jail. I did 9 months. I did 9.5 months and I got out and I jumped right back in. People in the program started writing me from when I was in jail that I didn't even know, just supporting me because I had shared in a meeting that I had to turn myself into jail. Like that's what I have found here. You know, I don't have family. I do now. You know, like immediate family. I've got my dad back in my life and my mother-in-law and, you know, my husband and my son and my kids now. And like, I've gotten all those things back. But when I got here, I didn't have any of that stuff. And I've built relationships here that there's just no words to describe. I've been able to work steps. The biggest thing that I wanted when I got here was I wanted to forgive myself for what I had done. And I wanted to learn to love who I am. My teeth, I think, were my biggest teacher in self-love because I could not afford to get my teeth fixed. And when you have no teeth, it's like the most obvious thing, especially even when you go outside of recovery and people that don't know anything about it, when you smile, they're like, well, why did you lose your teeth? There's something bad must have happened, and I always used to think that people could see on the outside what I had done to myself on the inside, and it forced me to make a choice. And that choice was to live in that anxiety and probably use in that debilitating insecurity that I felt every time I opened my mouth, or learn to love myself from the inside out. Learn to change the conversation that I have with myself, that it's temporary, that I'm safe, that I'm lovable, that I'm a good human, that I'm beautiful, that I'm worth having a life, that it's okay to smile, that I deserve to smile, and to surround myself with people that made me feel comfortable in my skin, that made me feel good about who I was. And to seek more of those. Who taught you that? My learning it on my own. A lot of that. My sponsor has been huge for me about finding God. I don't know, self-love has just been something that I have not stopped trying to seek. And it's something that's continuing to grow. Today, I got some amazing news that I would have. I just got a promotion at my job to be the supervisor of all of the paralegals and legal assistants. And I don't even have a GED. Or a paralegal degree.
Let's not tell anyone.
I know. And what's even crazier is when I got the job at this firm, when they ran my background, I have a first-degree felony, and they were not going to hire me. And the two attorneys that brought me over from the last firm advocated for me. They're like, no, we'll put our word on it. She's really good. We worked with her at the last firm for 3 years. They were like, she comes in high one time, like we're not. And they're like, no, it's going to be fine. And they went out on a limb and hired me. And the woman that was really adamant about not hiring me, it's really amazing how this program is, because I'd say like my third month there, it's like Sunday morning and I'm cleaning the house and just like whatever, my phone rings. And I don't recognize the number and I answer it. And I had never really said 2 words to this. She's like my boss's boss's boss. She's like, and we have 12 firms. So she's like up there.
Yeah.
And it's her. And she's crying. And she's like, I don't know if this is appropriate or not. She's like, but I don't know what to do. And I feel like you might be the only one to be able to help me.
Wow.
She's like, my brother needs help. And I think that you might be able to help me with that.
Wow.
And I was able to walk her through that whole process of getting him here and into a state place. And it was just, I said, so what did you think when you were hired? She goes, honestly, my exact words when I saw your file was, fuck that. And she's like, and honestly, you've been one of the best hires that we've had.
That's amazing.
And now from there, and
just give you a promotion.
Yeah. From making $8 an hour at a to-go pizza place to where I am now in life is just as a direct result of doing the work here. It is an inside job, because I remember when I got my teeth fixed after being 3 years clean.
You got them fixed at 3 years.
So is it even crazier how God works? I feel like there's so much more amazing stuff in my life in recovery than there has been the rest of the stuff, but it's also so important to share, because that we could go from that and have this is, so like I went in to figure out how to get my teeth fixed, and they gave me like an estimate of like $25,000. And I remember just crying. I'm like, there's just no way I'm going to be able to fix them. And I would always say, if I just got my teeth fixed, I'll be happy. Like, I'll feel good about myself. My teeth are my biggest issue, and I never would open my mouth, and I would barely smile. And, and I like to smile. Like, I want to be happy. I met this guy and we started dating, and, we were talking, and he's like, yeah, my dad's a dentist. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't think too much about it.
Patrick.
Yeah. And over time, this man and I continued dating, who's now my husband, and whose father fixed all my teeth for free.
Wow.
Like, you just never know how things are going to play out. And when you talk about, in our program, we talk about trusting the process, that God's got a plan that you can't see, but you just got to hang in there. There's a line in one of our books that talks about, that when you feel like you're in the darkest place, there is something working for the better of you while you're in that dark place. And don't ever forget that. That you never know what's on the other side of that, and I ended up getting my teeth fixed. And I remember it was a 2-year process. I had like 12 pulled at one time, and there's so many broken pieces. And the first time he gave me like a flipper, it was like a temporary mouthpiece. You put it in so it would fill in the blank spaces. And I remember I had it and I got up and I went to the gym and I realized that I forgot to put it in. And I had this moment where it didn't even really matter, that I was okay to go out in public and not have my teeth. And I felt okay about it. Like I had gotten to a place of total acceptance of myself at that point, that I was okay with or without the teeth, that wasn't what was the important. The important was how I felt inside. And it was like one of those moments that I was really able to attach what they meant by it being an inside job, because I truly had meant with everything in me, if my teeth were just fixed, I'd be happy. And it's such bullshit.
Yeah.
It's just such bullshit. In recovery, when I got clean, I had way less in my life than I had when I worked at Countrywide, and I was happier than I had ever been. You know, the gratitude, that feeling, it's not just saying you're grateful, but that feeling of what gratitude really means, you know, and what it feels like, you know, and living in it and walking outside and feeling the sun and feeling the breeze and just being so grateful to be alive. Yeah, it's just been...
Yeah, when you get clean, there's like this feeling of alive that like is indescribable, you know? Like I remember the first time I drove with the windows down.
Yeah.
And like the, you know, wind hitting your face. And it was like being in prison for years and never seeing the sun. Like when you get clean, you really do feel like this ray of like life, you know? And it's not always like that, you know, but I do have those moments where like, I cannot believe that I'm clean.
Yeah.
Like there's two parts of me that can't believe I ever used. And there's a part of me that can't believe that I'm not using.
Yeah, I know. The thing I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to have 7 years clean. Like it just... blows my mind, you know, an addict like me that used the way that I did, you know. But for me, I think that feeling is a little different. Like you say, like it doesn't always feel like that. No, it doesn't always feel so dramatically happy. But what have acquired here is that I am always genuinely happy, even when I'm going through some of the worst things. I can still... And it's been a practice of changing conversation with myself has been a huge thing for me, is that when I'm going, because I've been through some really tough things. I've lost a really close sponsee. I've lost my stepmom of 36 years in this program. You know, I've learned that my son is depressed and experiences heavy anxiety and questions why I left him, where my aunt is. My aunt told me this a while back. The grandmother of my oldest daughter had sent me an email before I had ever really made communication with her that Peyton is angry and that she doesn't know who I am and she doesn't know why that we left her and why wasn't she good enough. And I remember getting that and having to pull over on the side of the road because I couldn't even breathe from the guilt. It was just so intense. And then the moments of remembering what I had done to Tyson when I would peel him off of me and put him on the floor, or when I would lock him in a room and sit on the other side so I can get high, and he would bang on the door and cry and I would get high, because I just needed him to get away from me. But the drugs were so strong. Like the moments where that guilt just overtakes me. Having done the work here and having accepted that I was a sick person and, you know, and that, you know, I was completely caught up in the grips of my disease, and that, you know, even though that I did those things then, it doesn't mean that that's who I am now. And that it wasn't for lack of love. It was my lack of ability to love them because I couldn't love myself, which in turn taught me how to forgive my mom, because I realized how much I loved my kids. So I knew that my mom loved me. So then I started the process of being able to let that go, of knowing that my mom did the best that she could with what she had. And my mom didn't have much, you know, and I don't know how she grew up, but I know that I need to have compassion. You know, my mom didn't get the ability of a 12-step program to be able to make the changes and break the cycle. But I get to do that for my son, Connor, now. And I said to myself when I first got clean, the one thing that I was going to do that was like an amends to my kids is I was never going to have kids again. And my whole life's focus was going to be about my kids and building relationships with them. But at the end of the day, my kids need me to be happy. And whatever that becoming happy means, that's what I need to do. Because if I'm not happy, I'm not going to stay clean. Then I'm going to be no use to them. But Connor's been such a gift because my oldest daughter, Peyton's excited about having a relationship with him because she didn't get to have one with Tyson. And I get to allow her to be involved in that. And she gets to allow me to be in her life. And, you know, it's just incredible. You know, life has just been one amazing thing after the other. Although some things have been extremely painful, they've made me stronger. They've matured me here. They've prepared me for everything that has continued to come next. I would, and I remember first being clean that I was like, I wanted to get a huge, really good job and I wanted all this money and I needed to get a car. Listen, if I would have had the responsibilities of having a car and a job and the kind of job that I have now when I first got clean, I wouldn't have stayed clean. Like thank God that I only had a small job and had barely anything to my name. I couldn't handle it. I thought I could.
I always tell I always tell people like, serve pizza, serve ice cream.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Like keep it simple.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people don't realize what they're up against. Like they have this overconfidence.
Yep.
And it's with anything like, I started jogging a lot. And like when I go do like 8 miles or 10 miles or something.
You are insane with the way you, but I've seen you build up to it though.
But like when I go with someone who's never gone before, you can tell who's never ran before because they have that overconfidence. And then after 4 miles, they're like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
Like I've done it a couple times, so I know what it takes and I know it's not going to be easy. So I don't do the first 3, 4, 5 miles, at a super fast pace. I want to get into it. I stretch a lot, like I know it's a long journey and I've seen people just like, amateurs, and it's a lack of experience. What we're up against is something stronger than mother's love of their kids.
Yeah.
So whether it's pills or heroin or alcohol or how long you've been using, it doesn't matter. The disease is just as strong in me as it is in you. It just comes out in a different way. And that's what I really try to like instill in people is that like, just because you feel good now doesn't mean it's going to be easy. This is just the first lap. You know what I mean? This is like the first lap. Holler at me on mile 5, and you're going to realize that you should have drank more water or you should have done this and it's too late now. Yeah. And, you can say, yeah, I'm always happy and that's great, but I also know how much work you do.
Yeah.
You don't just wake up one day and you're always content and you don't care if your teeth are fixed or not, it's from a lot of work.
Yeah, and it's from a lot of pain. It's been the pain that has driven that. There's been days that I would wake up and I would just look in the mirror and my skin would crawl, and I feel like that, I have a choice every day. I can continue to live feeling the anxiety and feeling the hatred and feeling my skin crawl. And it's not a choice as in like, if I choose not to feel that way, I'm just not going to feel that way. That's not the choice. The choice is accepting that right now, this is where I'm at and honoring where I'm at and being okay with not feeling okay, but knowing that I don't have to change how I feel to be okay. And then I can pick up the phone and I can call somebody and I can express to them how I feel. And I've learned how to ask for what I need here, and that's why I've always say to seek out people that make you feel good about who you are when you're around them and that make you feel safe. Because there was times that I would have to call people and I would be like, tell me that my teeth aren't that bad. Just tell me that I'm delusional. And I'm like, or I would say, are my teeth really bad? And they would reassure me that it's not that bad. And they would reassure me what a great person that I am and that my teeth don't matter. And I would feel okay for a little bit. And then it would come back and then I would remember their words and I would repeat those words in my head. And then I would practice trying to say them to myself. Like I had to implement new practices. I had to change my way of thinking. I had to change my behavior. I had to change everything around me so that I could create an environment so that I could get to a place of being okay with myself. My first sponsor told me that I'll never meet a respectable man until I fix my teeth.
Wow.
Yeah. And
That's
when
crazy.
you want to stay clean and you want to change, it doesn't matter what happens on the outside. Like when you're ready to stay clean, like you will, and as insecure as I was about that, and as hard as it was, I let that sponsor go. We're still really close today. I love her to death. I know that there was no ill intention, but I remember that. And I met Patrick and had no teeth. I was actually really fat and had no teeth when I met Patrick. And he was really thin.
I think your teeth were better than Patrick.
Yeah, it's possible. And it's funny because I was fat and he was really thin and in really great shape. And
the
then
tables turned.
Yeah, I don't, we got comfortable and life got full and life got good. And
Patrick's really amazing.
He is.
Yeah.
He's I never thought that I'd be with a man again. Men used to give me anxiety. He's the first man that I chose to be with in recovery.
Yeah. Because I was sponsoring him when you guys started dating. And he was like, bro, I met this girl, but she won't hook up with me until I get a year.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, where'd they do that at? You know, like, where'd you find this person, you know? And he was like, oh, bro, she's all into recovery and she's like super serious, but like, I think I'm going to stick it out. And I was like, bro, you have like 11 months.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was like, I think you can stick it out.
You can manage.
Yeah.
You know, but it was great because when I met him, you know, when you talk about having to have faith, you know, and faith that if you do the right thing, God will work things out exactly the way it's supposed to. I had that fear of calling him that he's going to find another girl and that, you know, and I finally found like some guy that I liked and like wanted to hang out with. And now I have to like, he actually, when we first met, I think he had like 9.5, almost 10 months clean. I remember I called my sponsor and I was like, oh, I met this guy. And her first question always,
no.
How much clean times you got, Rachel? And I was like, well, she goes, don't be a predator. I was like, I remember I hung up, I cried. I was like, a predator. I was like, I'm not a predator. She's like, you need to let that man recover, you know? And thank God Patrick did the work because he like,
I think that's what motivated him.
He did. He worked a few more steps. He changed his home group, you know, he like, you know, and yeah, man. And actually when I met my youngest daughter is when him and I were first starting to talk. And I remember, God, that was a crazy experience. I wrote out my 8th step. And, you know, it's like you write out your 8th step, not thinking that there's a 9th step. The 8th step is you write how you've harmed people. And then the 9th step is actually taking your amends out and making them. And so I wrote my kid's dad on there and the grandmother that had my youngest. And I'm like, I haven't talked to my kid's dad in 10 years. You know, the next morning I got a Facebook messenger from him. Wow. Within 7 days, I was in my car on my way to Orlando to make amends to him. And then from Orlando, I was going to go to Jacksonville and meet my youngest daughter for the first time and make amends to her. And then try to see my aunt and his mom if they would allow me. Well, my kid's dad gives me the wrong address. Well, he tells me I could spend the night at his house. He promises me he's not using. So I'm driving up there. Now I have just enough money for gas. I'm totally broke. I'm just not for a hotel room. He's going to let me stay there. I get there. First, he gives me the wrong address. I'm at the wrong house. Now he's not answering the phone. I'm stuck up there. My sponsor's like, fuck it, just keep driving. Go to Jacksonville. She's like, just skip it. About 5 minutes later, he calls me back, gives me the right address. I go there. I pull up. It's like some crack house. And here he comes outside so high. I'm like, damn it. I get him in the car. We make amends. We go to a meeting. I take him to a meeting. He asked me for $10. I gave it to him. And I was like, I can't stay the night with you. And he got all upset. I was like, I'm not. So I was going to sleep in my car at a rest stop and then go to Jacksonville the next day. So I was determined to see my daughter. And my sponsor, you know, she's like, just sleep in the car. It'll be okay. I would have had to turn the car off because I didn't have enough gas, like that or kind of thing. And Patrick's like, why don't you just let me pay for a hotel room? And he's like, you could pay me back. And I let him do it. And I know it sounds so simple, but it was like one of those first times that like someone, like a man, like showed up for me and didn't want anything from me, but just wanted to like support me in something amazing. That happened. That was the first time I stayed in a hotel since I had clean. I remember I woke up and I panicked. Wow. Because I was like, did I use? You know, and like I just, you know, that mental reminder of like it's, you know, having woken up in so many hotel rooms and not a good space. And our relationship just took off. It was just little things like that, you know, and it was built on showing up and everything above the physical stuff, you know, and then I went and watched him get a year medallion and that was it. We dated from then on and now we're married. Yeah, it's crazy. So cool. And have a kid. Yeah. And he looks, we might as well name him Patrick. We probably should change his name. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for having me. So cool. I appreciate it. You're the best. Thank you. Thanks. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 888-699-9395 to speak to a specialist. This show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.